This is the edit on the fly version of the sermon. We spent a lot of time talking to Reverend Jay. So, I have been very formed by military service. I have never been in the service, but my entire life, and in a sense all my values, come from the fact that I am the son of two veterans. My dad was a Marine in Korea. He dropped out of Ohio State University on a football scholarship to join the Marines. When he found out that every single last player on that team was also All-State and a complete star of their team as well. And he was riding the bench a lot. And one of the stories he told me a lot from Korea is he said, part of why he joined Marines was to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. And he said it took about 2 minutes of getting shot at by the Chinese to figure out what he did not want to do with the rest of his life. And he never made much of a big deal about his service. He would march in the parades when asked. He kept his Marine uniform all his life. But it was a low-key thing for him. He did what he did because he did it, because he thought it was an honorable thing to do. And he didn't need to be celebrated at every possible opportunity. He taught me a lot of different things along with my mom. Before what they taught me, her story. My mom joined the Women's Army Corps in 1950s because she was having a really hard time in the little town of Mattapoisett where she lived, because for junior and senior year she dated the school's only black boy. And felt like she couldn't marry him and was getting a lot of hard stuff from parents and other people, so she left and joined the Army. As fate would have it, when she got to the train, the officer in charge of putting the recruits on the train and getting them to Fort McClellan, Alabama, gave her all the recruits' tickets, all the recruits' meal tickets, everything they needed was entrusted to my mom, including the tickets and meal tickets for the black woman named Shirley, who was also a recruit. Everything was fine till they literally hit the Mason-Dixon line. And Shirley was ordered to go to the back of the train. My mom says this kicked off everything in her. You know, the reason she's on the train in the first place is dealing with stuff like this. So she sat for a couple minutes and stewed, and finally she got up, went to the back of the train, grabbed Shirley, and brought her back to the front. When the conductor threatened her, and threatened to throw both my mom and Shirley off the train, my mom said, "This woman is a United States Army recruit. She's staying with the rest of the recruits. If you have any trouble with that, you're going to have to throw us all off the train and tell the U.S. Army why you did it." She says to this day she has no idea how those words got out of her mouth. And Shirley rode through the South in the front car with the rest of the recruits. When they got to Fort McClellan, Alabama, the commanding officer told my mom, "Are you crazy? You could have got both yourselves killed." And good job. My dad became a high school football coach, then a college professor, and he was very active in the peace movement. He was very active in the peace movement during Vietnam. He was active against the war in Iraq. And yet, all the while I was growing up, he would take his hat off himself and whack me in the stomach when I refused to take my hat off during national anthem or just forgot to do so. I learned a lot of things from my parents that have really formed, in many ways, why I became a minister. They wouldn't allow me to play with toy guns, never had any violent video games, insistence on paying respects during the national anthem, although I'm fairly confident I will kneel the next time I hear it. My veteran parents taught me to vote, to never miss an election, even for school committee, because too many people died, making sure I had the right to do that. And my dad would weigh in, and if you don't vote, you'll get politicians who will send you off to die for reasons far less weighty than real human rights. My mom taught me that women serve this country as well as men, that women do anything as well as men. They both taught me that racism and homophobia are wrong. They taught me the pen is mightier than the sword, and sometimes, when there's no choice left, you have to defend yourself. I said in a sermon earlier this fall that I'm troubled by the way our culture now seems to almost fetishize the military and patriotism. Almost a patriotic correctness. If you're not observant patriotically in exactly all the ways the society expects you to, there may be something wrong with you and you are unpatriotic. And I wonder what my dad would have thought of all that. As much of a peaceful guy as my dad was, he called himself an almost pacifist. There's a scene in the movie A Few Good Men, right, where the Colonel Jessup is on trial for ordering this hazing thing that resulted in a death, and the Tom Cruise character is trying to get him to admit he did this, and he says, I want the truth, and we all know the line, you can't handle the truth, right? But it's what he says after that that always struck me as the hard part of that movie. And in a sense, it's part of the struggle we heard in our conversation today. The Colonel says, you know, this world has walls, and sometimes you have to defend those walls, and you need men like me up there to defend them. I'm not sure you need people who break their own rules or go to the extent that that character did. But the point in there is that at some time, at some place, sometimes you just got to defend something. And I struggle like my dad did. I want to be a pacifist, and I get that close most of the time. Aidan Ballou, the founder of our community, was a pacifist. One of his favorite scripture passages was, and he shall judge between the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Ballou held that positions were nonviolent and non-resistant were the only way to obey God, and he said that followers of God and Jesus need no earthly government if they follow their conscience, and that conscience requires nonviolence. Ballou didn't believe in building walls of any kind. He believed in tearing them down, removing the walls that separate us. Edward K. Spahn, one of his biographers, writes, members of the Non-Resistant Society established at least 5 experimental socialist pacifist communities: Fruitlands, Brook Farm, Hopedale, Schenectady, New York, and Northampton Association. In its 14-year history, Hopedale outlasted them all. He says, and it was neither the most interracial, nor the most anti-religious or anti-governmental, nor the most industrial. Rather, the longest-lasting community was apparently the one that was moderately interracial, moderately industrial, most willing to permit wage differential, most clearly religious, and the most clearly nonviolent and non-resistant. Veterans Day observance began as observing the armistice on November 11th, 1918. And it's practiced around the world still as a day of peace. And I think on this Veterans Day, with the conversations we've had and the questions we've heard, it's good for us to remember that those who served also beat swords into plowshares. My dad did, my mom did. And we need to honor those who had to take up the sword. We need to honor those who beat them into plowshares. And we need to honor those who spent their life in service to the plowshares only. And I hope, as the inheritors of the Hopedale community, we can all do just that.